Hi, in this video we're going to be learning about how to add integers. So in class today you got this foldable, so if you haven't already go ahead and fold it so that you can still see the title, Adding Integers. And remember that integers are just positive and negative whole numbers. So there are basically two rules for adding integers. And so the first rule is going to be when you're adding integers with the same sign. So that's when they're both positive or both negative. And then there's a different rule for when the integers have different signs. So either positive and negative or negative and positive. And so basically by the end of this video, you ought to be able to know how to do both of these types of problems. So let's go ahead and open up our foldable. We're going to start by looking at what you do when you add integers that have the same sign. So in this first example, both of the numbers are positive. And I'm going to show you two ways that you can model this, and then we're going to come up with a rule. So the first way to model adding integers is to use integer chips. And basically, that's just when you use a symbol or an actual token to represent positive and negative numbers. So this first one is a positive 2, so I want to show a positive 2 by drawing two positive tokens. And then I'm going to add to that positive 5. So I'm going to draw 5 more positives. So then if I were to count these up, I could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 positive tokens, so my answer is 2 plus 5 is equal to 7, which of course is something you already knew, but the same method can also be applied to negative numbers. So if I'm starting with a negative 3, I want to start by drawing 3 negative tokens. And then I'm adding another negative, so that would be 1 more. And then I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, a total of 4 negatives, or negative 4. And notice here that this number is in parentheses, but there wasn't an operation to do inside the parentheses. Those parentheses are there just to separate that negative sign from the addition sign. So you'll see that quite a bit, like there's another one down here. Okay, so in this third example, I'm starting with a negative 1, and I'm adding a negative 6 to this. So I'm going to draw 6 more. So that's a total of negative 7. So negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. I can also model this with a number line. So I'm going to start with 1. So I always want to start my number line from 0. So I'm going to start from 0 and go to positive 1. And remember, positive numbers are to the right of 0. So from 0, I'm going to go over 1 space until I get to positive 1. And then because I'm adding a positive 7, I'm going to continue to go in the positive direction, or to the right, 7 more spaces. So from 1, I can count over 7 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My answer is where I end up, which is positive 8, which again is something you knew already. 1 plus 7 is 8. That hasn't changed. Okay, so the same method again we're going to apply to a negative number. So I'm starting from 0. My number is negative this time, so I'm going to go to the left because that's the direction of the negative numbers, to the left of 0. I go over 3 spaces till I get to negative 3, and then because I'm adding negative 3 to that, I'm going to continue to go left 3 more spaces. 1, 2, 3, until I end up at negative 6. So the sum of negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. And the last example, for this one, I'm going to again start from 0. So I'm going to draw on my 0 and move to the left until I get to negative 5. And then because I'm adding a negative number, I'm going to continue to go 4 more spaces. And I can see that I'm going to end up at negative 9. All right, well, sometimes it is not always practical to use a model to add integers, especially when you're adding very large numbers like positive 50 plus negative 48. It's going to take you a long time to draw that many tokens or to draw a number line. So we want to know a rule that we can use that we can apply to any integer problem. And if you take a look at what you just did, we know that when we add two positive numbers, our answer is positive, and all we did was add the 1 and the 7 to get to 8. Well, the same was true with negative numbers. Really, all I did was add the two numbers, 3 plus 3 is 6, and then the answer stayed negative, because really I'm just continuing to go in the negative direction. Same thing here, 5 plus 4 is 9, and then it's still negative because I continued to go negative. Or if you think about it as tokens, if I just add more negative tokens to the negative I started with, I'm just going to have more. So we want to write that rule down. Let's say that when we're adding integers with the same sign, So again, both negative or both positive. I want to add and keep the same sign. Right? So if I were going to apply that to -1 plus -6, I'm going to add the 1 and the 6 to get 7, and then I'm going to keep the negative. All right, so the rule is a little different when I add integers with two different signs. So I'm going to start with integer chips like I did earlier. So a +6 means I'm going to draw 6 positives. And then to that, I want to add 2 negatives. Well, this one's a little different because I can't just add negatives to the positive and have a total number of positive or negatives. That doesn't make sense. So what I need to do is know something about integers. A +1, this +1 token here, we can think of this in terms of money. If I have a $1 or $1, it's like a +1. If I spend that dollar, that's like a -1. Well, if I have a dollar and then I spend a dollar, I'm really right back at 0. So what that means for this is that when I have a +1 and a -1, those just really cancel each other out. And that's called a 0 pair. A +1 plus a -1 is just 0. And so when that happens, I can show that I'm going to cancel out the positive and -1 by drawing a line through it. And anytime I can line up a positive and a negative, I can cancel those out. So I can draw that one, a line through that one too. And so whatever's left is the answer to your addition problem. So what's left here is a +4. All right, so for the second example, -9 plus 7, I'm going to again start with drawing 9 negatives. And then to that, I want to add 7 positives. And I want to go back and then cancel out any 0 pairs. So I have a negative and a positive, and again, I'm just going to keep going until I can't cancel anything else out. So what I have left is 2 negatives or -2. Same thing on the next one, 8 plus -8. I bet you can maybe start guessing what the answer to this is going to be. Go ahead and draw your 8 positives. And then you want to line that up with your 8 negatives. And then the last thing you're going to do is cancel out your 0 pairs. That's the fun part, right? And you can see that there's nothing left over. No positive, no negatives. So my answer here is just a 0. All right, well, you can also model positive and negative numbers with the number line. So here I'm going to start from 0. It's a +5. So I want to go to the right until I get to +5. And this time I'm adding a -2. So because I'm adding a negative number, I want to go to the left 2 spaces. So 1, 2, and where I end up is my answer, which is a +3. All right, so for number 5, I'm starting from 0. First number is 6, so I want to go to +6. And then negative is what I'm adding to that, so I'm going to go in the negative direction or to the left 9 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can see my answer is -3. All right, for our last example, I have -4. So again, I'm going to go from 0 to -4. So this time I'm going to the left first. Because I'm adding a +5, I want to go back to the right 5 spaces. So that would take me to +1. So my answer, or my sum, of -4 plus 5 is a +1. So what is a rule we can use for when we're adding integers with different signs? So let's figure that out. When adding integers with different signs, what is really happening? Well, here, -4 plus 5 gave me a +1. So I really didn't add 4 plus 5. What I really did was subtract it. My answer was +1. Same thing here. I have 6 and 9. I didn't really add those numbers. I actually subtracted them. 9 minus 6 gives me 3. So the trick is knowing whether your answer is negative or positive. Well, that's determined by really which direction you ended up going. So here I had +6 to start with, But when I added -9, I went all the way back to 0 and kept going because there were more negatives. Okay, or you can think of it in terms of your tokens here. If I have more negative tokens than positive tokens, when I cancel these out, what I'm going to be left with is whatever I have more of. So here I had more negatives because 9 is larger than 7. And here I had positives left over because 6 was larger than 2 and there were more positive tokens. All right. So the rule I'm going to write for this is then when adding integers with different signs, what I actually do is subtract the numbers. But I keep the sign, all right, of the most. What I have the most of. Either if I have more positives, then your answer is positive. If I have more negatives, the answer is negative. Or another way to think of that is instead of the most, we're subtracting and keeping the sign of the most, is to keep the sign of the largest absolute value. So we've talked about absolute value before. Remember, that's just the distance from 0. So which one is the furthest from 0? That's going to be the sign of your sum or your answer. All right, so 5 has a larger absolute value than -4. It was positive, so my answer is positive. Here, the largest absolute value of both of these would be 9. And since 9 started off negative, my answer is negative. All right, so let's just apply that to a couple of examples. So you don't have to write this next part down, but since you're going to do homework over some of these, I want to give you a few examples. Let's say you start with -2 plus -3. All right, so if I'm using my rules that I just wrote down, I know that when the signs are the same, I add and keep. All right, so since these are both negative, -2 plus -3, then I'm going to add 2 plus 3 and get 5, and then I'm going to keep the negative. Okay, if the signs are different, what did we just say? You're going to subtract and keep the sign of the most. So let's say in this next one, they're different. So let's say I have a -7 plus 5. This one's negative, this one's positive. I'm going to subtract those. So 7 minus 5 is 2. And then I'm going to keep the sign of what I have the most of. So I have more negatives than positives. So my answer is -2. Again, if you have more than one set of integers to add, so let's say I have -2 plus -3 plus -1. I'm just going to do 2 at a time. Or shortcut is to do all your negatives and then all your positives and then add them together. That's something else you can do. So I would do these two first, -2 plus -3. They have the same sign, so I'm going to add them. I guess I just did that, but 2 plus 3 is 5, and it's still negative. Okay, and then I still need to add the plus -1. Okay, again, these have the same sign. They're both negative, so I'm going to add and keep that. 5 plus 1 is 6, and it's still negative. All right. If I have several, let's say I have -4 plus 8 plus -3. Okay, and one way to do this is to add the -4 plus 8. So when I do that, I have a negative and a positive. That makes them different. So I'm going to subtract the numbers. 8 minus 4 is 4. I have more positives, so my answer is a +4. But then I still need to do the plus and -3. So now they still have different signs. One's positive and one's negative. So remember, I'm going to subtract these. So 4 minus 3 is 1. And this time I have more positives than negatives because 4 is bigger than 3. So my answer is a +1. Or another way to do this, if I want it, because remember, addition is associative, I can add the two negatives together first. So -4 plus -3, they have the same sign. So I can add those, that's 7. And then I'm going to keep the negative, so -7 plus 8. And then these are different signs. So I'm going to use this rule now, subtract them. And I'm going to get 1. There are more positives. So my answer is a +1. So just 2 ways to do that problem. All right, so that's all for adding integers. Don't forget to do your homework and watch the other video that goes along with this tonight. And I will see you in class tomorrow. Have a good evening.